It's important to understand externalities because externalities are an instance in which a market can end up producing the wrong amount of a product. To understand externalities, let's begin with the definition of demand. Demand is the relationship between the price of a product and the number of units consumers are willing to purchase. Marginal benefit is the additional benefit consumers obtain from having one more unit of a good. For example, if we look at demand, we can say if the price of a product is $8, consumers will be willing to purchase 5 units. The reason they're willing to purchase 5 units is because the benefit of that 5th unit just equals the price of $8 they have to pay. In other words, consumers would not buy a 6th unit because the benefit they obtain from the 6th unit is less than the $8 charge that they would have to pay. So demand represents the marginal benefit of the product to consumers. Demand and marginal benefit are the same thing. Similarly, supply is the relationship between the price of a product and the number of units producers are willing to offer. Marginal cost is the additional cost to producers of offering one more unit of the product. So for example, if we look at a supply curve, when the price of the product is $2, producers are willing to offer 11 units. The reason they're willing to offer 11 units and not 12 is because the cost of offering the 12th unit exceeds the $2 price that they're receiving. Or in other words, the supply curve represents the marginal cost to producers of producing various units. So marginal benefit and marginal cost are the benefit to consumers of consuming one more unit of a good and the cost to producers of offering one more unit of a good. When marginal benefit equals marginal cost, the market is producing the right number of units of the product. The benefit of having one more unit exactly balances with the cost of manufacturing and offering this one more unit. Now, marginal benefit and marginal cost talk about the benefit and cost to the market participants. We can also imagine marginal social benefit and marginal social cost. Marginal social benefit is the marginal benefit to society as a whole from the transactions in this market. Marginal social cost is the marginal cost to society as a whole from the transaction in this market. If the only people affected by the transactions in the market are the consumers and the producers within the market, then marginal benefit and marginal social benefit are the same thing. Marginal cost and marginal social cost are the same thing. However, if the market transactions impose costs or benefits on people outside the market, then the marginal benefit is no longer equal to the marginal social benefit, and the marginal cost is no longer equal to the marginal social cost. This phenomenon of imposing costs or benefits on people outside the market is called an externality. Externalities can be positive or negative, that is, they can impose a benefit or a cost, and externalities can be consumption or production. That is, they can arise from the consumption of a good or they can arise from the production of a good. A positive consumption externality is the imposition of a benefit on others due to the consumption of a product. For example, if someone wears some perfume that smells nice and the smell is imposing a benefit on people around this person, the benefit is arising because of the wearer's consumption of the perfume. We call this a positive consumption externality. Secondhand smoke is a good example of a negative consumption externality. When one person smokes, this person imposes a cost on others as a result of his consumption of cigarettes, a negative consumption externality. Positive production externalities are benefits imposed on others by the production of some product. So a bakery produces bread, and in the process of producing bread, these nice smells emanate. This is an imposition of a benefit on others due to the production of some product. A negative production externality, for example, is a firm producing a product and in the process throwing pollutants into a river. The pollutants are the imposition of a cost on others, and this cost is being imposed as a result of the production of a product. This is a negative production externality. In the absence of externalities, demand is the same as marginal social benefit and supply is the same as marginal social cost. So the market equilibrium, the point where demand and supply intersect, gives us the equilibrium quantity. This quantity is also the socially optimal quantity of product, because it's the quantity that arises where marginal social benefit equals marginal social cost. Now let's look at the case of a negative consumption externality. For example, secondhand smoke. The market for cigarettes has a demand and a supply, and that gives us an equilibrium quantity of cigarettes. Let's say 50,000 cigarettes per week. Because of secondhand smoke, the marginal social benefit of cigarettes is less than the demand for cigarettes. In other words, think of demand as the marginal benefit to the cigarette consumers, while marginal social benefit is the marginal benefit to everyone in society, including the cigarette smokers. The marginal social benefit is less than demand because although the cigarette smokers are receiving benefit from smoking, the people around them are experiencing secondhand smoke, and so their benefit is negative. When we put these two benefits together, the negative benefit from the people who experience the secondhand smoke and the positive benefit from the people who are smoking, we get the marginal social benefit. And this marginal social benefit is less than the marginal benefit or the demand to the cigarette smokers. So we see that the marginal social benefit intersects the marginal social cost at a quantity of 40. This 40,000 cigarettes per week is the socially optimal number of cigarettes. This is the number of cigarettes at which the marginal benefit to society of one more cigarette balances with the marginal social cost to society of having one more cigarette. So in this instance of the negative consumption externality, the market is producing more of the product than is socially desirable. Now let's look at a negative production externality. In this example, a detergent manufacturer manufactures detergent and in the process pollutes the environment. This is imposing a cost on others, and the cost arises as a result of production, a negative production externality. In the presence of the negative production externality, the marginal cost to society of producing the detergent is higher than the marginal cost to the producers of producing the detergent. For example, the demand and supply of detergent intersect at a quantity of 100,000 units. This is the point at which the marginal benefit to consumers of detergent equals the marginal cost to producers of detergent. But since the production of detergent imposes a cost on others, the marginal social cost is higher. So the point at which the marginal social cost of detergent equals the marginal social benefit of detergent is 80,000 units. This is the socially optimal quantity of detergent. And what we see is that in the presence of the negative production externality, the market will produce more of the product than is socially optimal. Externalities arise when property rights are either not well defined or not well enforced. What's happening is that there's someone who isn't accounted for in the market transaction because of this absence of property rights. For example, in the case of secondhand smoke, it's unclear who owns the air. Because it's unclear who owns the air, when people use the air by smoking and emitting smoke about it, other people are impacted, and those people have no say in this market for cigarettes because they are neither producers nor consumers of cigarettes. So the demand for cigarettes does not reflect the marginal benefit of everybody in society from the consumption of cigarettes. The solution here is to define the property rights. In some cases, this is easy. If you're talking about water or land, forests, it's easier to define who owns the property. Once the property owner is defined, the property owner now has a say in the market, and the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity will now reflect this property owner's desires. In the case of other things like the air, it becomes very difficult to define and enforce property rights. And so this is a possible place for government intervention in the form of pollution regulations. Having said that, as technology progresses, it becomes easier to define property rights, where earlier it was difficult to define property rights. So as technology progresses, we can turn more and more to market solutions to externalities by defining and enforcing property rights, thereby relying less on government regulation. The benefit to relying on property rights as opposed to government regulation is that when we regulate, the government does not know what the socially optimal quantity of a product is. For example, we might agree that it's bad to allow firms to pollute as much as they want. We would end up with a despoiled environment, pollution everywhere, and significantly reduced quality of life. Conversely, we can also agree that requiring zero pollution is also a bad thing. If we required firms to emit absolutely no pollution whatsoever, the cost of products would be astronomical. What this suggests is there's an optimal amount of pollution. Too much pollution is bad because it despoils the environment, but too little pollution is also bad because the cost of manufacturing and producing and living becomes prohibitive. The problem is government can't figure out what the socially optimal quantity of pollution is. However, markets can. If we are able to define property rights such that everyone who is impacted by the pollution has a voice in the marketplace, then through market forces, the equilibrium quantity we arrive at ends up being the socially optimal quantity also.